everyone, welcome to the Coding Channel. Today is the 21st episode of our Java programming tutorial series. And in this episode, we are going to talk about for each loop in Java. This and more when we come back. We learned from our previous episode that we can loop through an array using for loop. And we use the length property to specify the number of times the loop should run. So in this particular example, we have a string one-dimensional array favorite colors with values black, gray, blue, and white. So the length property here has a value of 4 with the 0 as the first index number of our first element. So 0, 1, 2, and 3, and you know that already. Then we can print out all the values of array elements by specifying the array name, which is the favorite colors, sub I, which is in this case, we have sub 0, sub 1, sub 2, sub 3. That's why if you are going to run this code, we get this output. We print out all the values of an array element. Now, in Java, there is another way of looping through an array, not using for loop, but by using the for each loop. Now let's try to convert this for loop example here using for each loop. Now we have now the for each string I favorite colors. If we're going to read this, we can read this as for each string element called I in a favorite colors array, print out the value of I. Now, don't be confused with a for and a for each. As you can see, it's a very simple to use the for each structure. But bear in mind that we're not talking of an index number here. Okay, why we specify a string I here? It's because the values of our favorite colors are strings. That's why we have the string variable I, and we have the array name. In between, you just put the colon. Okay, so that's the syntax of the for each structure. And then to print out all the values of our array elements, we use the string variable I. So take note, unlike in a for loop, the I here serves as the index number. The value of I is the index number. But in here, using for each loop, the value of I is not the index number, but the value of an array, which is black, gray, blue, and white. So if we are going to run this code, we still get the same result. Okay, so this time we use using for each. Favorite colors are black, gray, blue, and white. Now, let's take a look at another example that I have prepared to you. Now, I have here an example of a program that finds the largest value in an array elements using a for loop and if statements. Now, the question is, can we convert this using for each loop? Or if it's possible, how? Okay, so let's try to convert this. I just have to comment this first. And then let's try my a sample here. Okay, normally, before I show you the correct way, so this is an incorrect way of solving it because actually this is a common programming error because, for example, if you're basing only on the initialization in our for loop, and then we treat that since we used an integer here, so we think that okay, we can just use integer and then just use the array name here separated by colon, and that's it. We already converted to for each loop. Okay, and then nothing to be changed here, and then if statement. But if you are going to run this one, okay, we will encounter this type of error. And let me read this one. Exception in thread main, java.lang, unresolved compilation problem, type mismatch. Cannot convert from element type a double to int. So we think that, okay, since we have a double array here, and then we have an integer here, so we mean that is the type mismatch. So one way of solving it, again, okay, we think that, okay, why not, let's try to change it with, for example, this one with a double, for example, we have this conversion. Why not change it to integer, and then so that we can use the int I here, and then we still follow the if statements that we've yeah, used in the example above using for loop. Let me try to run this one. Okay, and okay, so once we use this one, we change already the data type of an array elements. So here's the error. Okay, exception and thread main, Java lang array index out of bounds exception, index 90 out of bounds for length 5. Okay, it's because we often forget that um, I here is the value of I is not the index number. Take note of that. The value of I is actually the value of the array number, which is in this case, for example, the first value is 90. Okay, so that's the first value of I here using a for each loop. Okay, and then another thing is that you cannot, since we use the for each now, you cannot use this type of syntax by specifying the number with a square bracket anymore. So how are we going to solve this problem? Okay, so let me show you how to solve it. Okay, here's the correct way of doing that. Okay, we can solve this by using, okay, I bring back the the values in our array, I which is double the original value. Okay, the first thing that you need to do if you want to convert this for loop, for example, okay, is to know the data type of our array. So in this case, it's a double data type. So make sure it's double. And then any variable that you want. Okay. And take note that this variable now can hold now the values of each array elements here one at a time. Okay. And then the number here again is the number array separated by colon. Okay. And take note of the changes that we made here using if. So in here, we only use the variable I, not the array name anymore. Okay, so if I is greater than largest, and then we assign now the I to largest. So in this case, we are assigning now the value of an array element to largest. And then let's try to run this program. Now you can see that using for each loop, the largest value is 99.8 in this example. So this is how we convert the the for loop using for each loop, and it seems that's very simple on how to use the for each loop. Okay. Okay, now what if we want to generate random numbers? Let's say we want to have a 6-digit number, and then each digit can have from 0 to 9, 0 to 9. So these are all a single digit. And then once you run this one, for example, so it will generate just a 6-digit number combination. So we can easily do this by using the for loop. Yeah, for example, we have the first loop to initialize the array lottery array, for example, here. Okay, for the first digit, second, third, and up to 6 digit. And then if we want to access it, we can just use another loop, okay, to access or to print out all the values of our lottery array. Now let's try to convert this by using, for example, for each. Okay, how are we going to do that? Okay, so I want to show you this one. Okay, so for example, we think that, okay, since we use two for loop here, so we also use a for each on here. So we have an int index, for example, and then lottery, and then we just simply assign it by using the syntax of a for each using the variable index here, and then we are now displaying the output. What do you think is the output? Is this a syntax error? Is it, or we, or this is, or is, you think this one is the correct way on how to convert using the for each? So let's try to run this one. Okay. Okay, and then so we have 0 0. Okay, if we're going to run it this one again, okay, it seems that yes, it's syntactically correct, but logically incorrect. Okay, we have a runtime error here. So why, what do you think is the problem? Okay, take note that using for each, one limitation is that we cannot assign, we cannot modify the value of an array elements by using for each, unlike in a for loop, because you cannot do like this. Okay, although we assign it, but as you can see, the result are all 0. Okay, this syntax is okay if you just want to display. Okay, but the problem here, okay, is on the first for loop, by just assigning it. So how, or what is the correct way of converting this um, for loop? Okay, let me try to comment this one again, and then to show you the correct way of doing that. And here's the correct way. Okay, let's try to this one using for each loop. Let's try to run again. So now we have 808.991.00. Okay, so the best way of doing that is by assigning it using the for loop, the for each loop. Okay, as you can see here, and then I put already the system that out that print inside of the for loop, because every time we assign here, okay, we print, because take note that for each can only handle one value at a time. Okay, and it cannot store values to our array element. So that's why every time we loop here, okay, we need to display. That is why, if you can see, the first for loop, the output of our first loop here is this one. Okay, and the output of our second for loop here is the 0 0 here. So I just want to show you that in our first for each loop example here, okay, this one is possible, and this is the only way on how we can just convert this for loop here. So it seems very simple. Okay, but after we have assigned, for example, and we think that, okay, can we access now the value of an array element, since we've used the for each structure here, so we think that way. Okay, but the result is different. Okay, I just want to show you, I included here the second for loop to show you that after we have assigned and print out the value of lottery, for example, using for each, okay, and we retrieve it, we access it again, we try to print out it again, the result is different. Okay, so that's the some limitation of using for each. So in this case, so I prefer that if you want to store the values, okay, that generated by the random numbers, for example, it could be better to use for loop. Okay, so my assessment here is that when is the right time to use a for each loop? If our goal is just to display or access or print out all the array elements, but if there is an assignment statement that would change the value, for example, of an array elements, so the for each loop is not applicable. Now let me run this next example. Okay, enter student name. For example, we have Mark. So Mark is currently enrolled. So in other words, this program only finds the name in a string array if it's found. So we can simply display that that student is currently enrolled, or is not in the list, for example. Okay, and then this one can be solved both by using a for loop and using for each loop. In this case, if you want to use the for loop, so you can just use this type of syntax. Okay, and then I convert this using a for each loop by specifying the, since we have the string array here, so we have a string I and then stud names, that's the name of our array. And then in our if statements, I just use here, instead of having if user input that equals ignore case stud name sub I just use here the variable I, and this one still works. Okay, that's how easy to convert that. Okay, our next example is just to show you now the limitations of using for each. Okay, and one example of doing that is by using this one. Okay, so for each loops are not appropriate when you want to modify the array. Okay, so like for example, let me try to run this one. Okay, here's the output of this example. Okay, what have you noticed? Okay, in our in using for loop. Okay, so this one is using for loop. Okay, we display all the numbers or the values of each array elements. Okay, even numbers, for example here 2 4 6 8 10. Okay, because we assign. Okay, now if we try to convert that using for each loop, okay, we have this output. As you can see, we have the value of 3. Okay, so that's the first a value of I, and then the rest uh is, the rest still follow the last value of I here, which is 3, which we generate now the runtime or logic error. So this is an example, one limitation of um, using for each loop. So in this particular case, you better use for loop. Okay, another limitation. Let me show you. Okay, the for each loop is let me just finish this. Okay, for each loops do not keep track of index, so we cannot obtain array index using for each loop. Okay, so for instance, let me run this again. Okay, so the output is using for loop. We have the numbers of 0. The result here is 0. Okay, 1 and 2. Okay, so it's like printing the values of array elements. Okay, but if we try to convert that using for each loop, we generate this type of output that the all the values of array elements is 0, since we have an initial value of 0 there. Okay, so that's not that's another limitation of using for each. Okay, another example we have here. Okay, for each only iterates a forward over the array in single steps and cannot be converted to a for each loop. Okay, so for instance, we have this one. For int I is equal to numbers that length minus 1, I is greater than 0, for example. Okay, if you try to run this one, okay, here's the output now. Okay, this one is using for loop, and this one is using this one, the for each loop. Okay, and what's the difference now here? So in here we're just trying to display it from backward. Okay, so 34987, for example. Okay, but we cannot use the version of for each by having this command, because the output is still the same. It simply outputs the um, array elements. Okay, not in reverse format. Okay, so what else? And next, let's try another limitation. Okay, for example, for each cannot process two decision making at once. It cannot be easily converted to a for each loop. So let me try to show you this one. Okay, if you're going to run this one, okay, so the output is we are actually what the what this code does is that, for example, if the value of number array is equal to the value of the R array. Okay, so in this example, in the second index, so the values are both 5. So if they're both equal, okay, we are going to assign to add 5 plus 5, for example, and then assign it to as a new value of array sub 1, for example, or the second element of R 1. So we can easily do this by using for loop, by having this one. Okay, and then so for example, we have 9 plus 9 again, so that's why we have 18 here, and 2 plus 2, we have 4 here. Okay, but if you are going to use the for each, yes, we can actually convert it, but it's not easy to convert. If you can see here, I have only used one for loop here, but in here, using for each, I tried to use the nested for loop, and I get the, you know, the same the result, except for the last one that there is a actually a logic error here. So that's the reason why you can use of the for each loop, but there is a limitation. Okay, and I just want to show you, to flash some of the things that you need to remember of using a for each loop in Java. And these are the source code for this episode. And that's all for today. And if you like this video, please give us a thumbs up and consider subscribing. And as always, show your love through comments and favorites. God bless and thank you for watching.